Can you tell? It is the end of the Northeast Wisconsin Film Festival, and I'm here with the two gentlemen behind this indie festival, bringing it back to Oshkosh. Come back here, Paul. We have Paul and Lee here, and I guess the first question, I'm not sure which one of you want to go first. What made you decide to bring the indie film, horror film festival specifically back to Oshkosh? Lee.
Well, I had helped John with the last few. I worked as a volunteer here at the time for all of the film festivals previous. And then John just couldn't do it anymore. Paul had come to the last one, and he wanted to know why there wasn't one in 2015, and it's just because John is busy. Can't do it. It was just not going to happen, so rather than do it half-assed, he was going to give it up. Paul wanted to have a fest again, and since he knew I had been somewhat involved, he came to me and said, "Hey, what can we do?" And this was about a year ago, and probably a little bit less than a year. But we talked about it, and before we knew it, it was happening.
And what is it about indie horror that you like so much, Paul, that kind of encouraged you to help out with the festival?
About independent filmmaking, it's got all these things about it that you just can't quantify. When you go to a mainstream film, you can pretty much guess what the plot's going to be. With independent films, it's a lot harder to figure that, to track that type of stuff down. So that's why it was really important to have that type of thing encouraged, because, I mean, you don't want things to get stagnant. So it's really nice to be able to have a place like the festival to support independent filmmaking so that we can encourage lots of new ideas, and that's why our festival had a lot of different broad range categories of horror. So that's why we did what we did.
And the venue, the Time Theater, now it was all volunteers this weekend, correct? And could you tell us just a little bit about the venue and how they kind of support films throughout the year, actually?
I've been a volunteer at the Time almost since the Time came back as a Time community theater showing films. It was abandoned for several years. It was kind of run down. Basically, it's been fixed up by the volunteers. Everybody that works here is 100% a volunteer. Nobody gets paid for anything, aside from some free popcorn once in a while. But it started out, again, with John Pata. He had an idea to start showing the cheesy 50s and 60s low-budget horror and sci-fi films. Everything that's in the public domain, we ran through. I think every movie that's a sci-fi horror film that's in the public domain, we have shown here for free on a Friday Fright Night. And eventually we were able to, it's a completely nonprofit, but we were able to start charging so that we could get better films, and we're getting actual like big budget Hollywood, like a normal films like a regular old theater would show. Yeah, it's more and more popular all the time. People love coming here. We're the first theater in town where you could sit down with a bag of popcorn and crack a locally made beer and enjoy a film.
Awesome. Now, for both, this is going to be for both of you. I'll get Paul first, but since this is your first fest, what would you say out of everything you experienced, what was probably the biggest surprise for you putting this together?
Probably the sleeping schedule, to be truthful. Because there were a lot of things that you could control, and there was a lot more things that you just didn't have control over, and that's what you try to sleep and you find hours here and there, and but it was really nice that a lot of people stepped up and were able to help out. So I was really happy about that. So.
What about you, Lee? What was your biggest surprise? I mean, you worked with it, but this is the first time kind of where you were leading the charge. What was your biggest surprise?
That it really came together. I like in the last few weeks, we've been trying to get the films together. Like I said, we had no experience fully organizing it. It was ridiculous. And really, there were not any problems. I mean, with the biggest issues, getting the films together so that we could get them into a playlist to get to the volunteers at the time who could actually play the damn films. It's not as simple as as putting a film strip on a reel anymore. It's all digital, and any little digital problems, and we had some problems. We had films submitted and audio wasn't working. One of the films a week ago, one of the films just stopped after I think 7 minutes. Gone, just done. Skipped on to the next movie, no idea why. We had to get it resubmitted, and that was, I was honestly very, very nervous about a film freezing, and then what do we do? Because we don't have any DVDs of these movies, we don't have any VHS copies of these movies, Super 8, nothing, beta, so everything, the fact that all the films worked, I mean, it's not that I had any issues with the people that were handling this stuff. Everybody Mary, especially Mary Manchester, put the playlist together from what we submitted to her. Did a fantastic job. She went way above and beyond, so that was pretty awesome.
Awesome. And you guys are already looking forward and planning on doing next year?
Hell yeah.
Definitely. Second weekend of October.
Second week of October, there you go, folks. You heard it here first. We're wrapping up the New Horror Film Festival. Check out newhorrorfest.com for all the films that showed this weekend. They're out there. Support indie cinema, and we will say good night.
Good night.
Good night.